To begin with, I can't begin to tell you how delighted I have been tonight to see so many old friends that go back 5 years, 10 years, several more decades than that really, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. My cousin Carl's up here all the way from Arkansas, and we grew up together. Why don't you stand up, Carl? You know, I know I'm not supposed to be introduced to anybody, but he's here. There are many others. I got a pocket full of cards that Diane wouldn't let me read. About half of you out here, you know, we're going to get introduced, but I was told that I shouldn't do that because there are too many folks here. But I guess it's time for me to close down the show with one of my infamous speeches. And even though this is kind of a draft of it, you know me, I'm fairly inclined to ad-lib anyway, so I'll bet a lot of you are glad that it's the last one you're going to have to listen to. I promise it won't be as interminably long as some of them have been. Well, I guess it could be said that a retirement is rather like a funeral. I nonetheless do definitely find it to be far preferable to a funeral. One very obvious reason that a retirement is preferable to a funeral, at least for a subject, is that at a funeral, its subject is invariably dead. And it can be pretty generally assumed that he can't see anybody out there. Although I'm having a little trouble with the lights, I can see all of you. Boy, there are a lot of you out there. I like to think of a retirement as being more like another graduation. And I've been through a few of them lately. Because there's still, at least hopefully, a certain immeasurable amount of time left for the graduate to continue to grow in a positive direction. My favorite American poet, Carl Sandburg, said, "Time is the coin of our lives, which runs too fast through our hands." Boy, how right he was. I don't think any of us can disagree with him. It seems like yesterday I was coaching these kids right here. Now they're not kids anymore. They're grown men, pushing 40 and 50. But my favorite French playwright, Edmond Rostand, also said, no matter how little time a man have remaining to him, or may have remaining to him, he's not old as long as he's still seeking something, and I am still seeking something. And I'll tell you what it is that I'm still seeking before I'm finished with this address. I discovered that quote by Rostand in a little book of sayings about retirement that Cecile Maroc gave me in her role as council president. Rostand was the author of Cyrano de Bergerac, my all-time favorite play. Cyrano was the contemporary of two other great literary heroes of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the dashing swordsman D'Artagnan, and a gentleman you've already heard about already this evening, Don Quixote, who was the creation of, who was he the creation of? Oh, you literary folks out there. Cervantes, Miguel de Cervantes. How could I forget that? One might well speculate that our modern era here could use a few traditional folks like those, particularly among our governmental leadership. I won't get deep into that tonight. While a retirement, in a certain sense, is like a new beginning, there's no question that it's an ending also. I clearly remember my first reluctant retirement over 30 years ago, which was from athletics as a competing international quarter-miler. In every world-class athlete, I guess you'd have to say there is at work a frankly egotistical and magnificent, nonetheless, alchemy. For those of you who know what alchemy is, it's an alchemy of mind and body and spirit that somehow generates a sum that's greater than its parts. Alchemists in the Middle Ages made the baser metals into gold. They didn't really. It was mythological, but they tried, God knows. Some of them pretended that they had succeeded. But world-class athletes don't pretend. Despite the intangibility of that alchemy that I'm talking about, it is that alchemy which, over the long competitive haul, ultimately separates the very finest performers from the very gifted performers, and there is a difference. And because that difference, though, is always so slight, it is often imperceptible. Those who have it win, and those that don't. This alchemy is probably as close as we can come, really, on this planet of ours, to matching the essence of that fabled pulse, the celebrated force. And from the earliest stirrings of my urge to race, and there are a lot of my colleagues out here that had those same stirrings to compete, I was always arrogantly certain that that force was with me, that that power was with me. There are many great ex-athletes here tonight who I know have felt that surging force fully, probably more fully than I have. We got Hayes Jones here tonight, who's the greatest high hurdler in the history of the world. I mean, he was running 13.3 on dirt, for those of you who know anything about times. I mean, the history of the world, not just his era, history of the world. We've got Jim Bibbs sitting over there, who tied Jesse Owens' 60-yard dash record, 1951. It had stood for 16 years. That man tied it. Mark Smith, national champion in the high jump. A lot of people here tonight, you know, who've accomplished more than I did. I never won an Olympic title. God knows I wanted one, but I never got one. This force, the surge of certainty that I'm talking about, is particularly essential in the personal character of a competitor in an individual sport like track or like boxing or like bullfighting, where the contestant really has only himself to count on. There's nobody there throwing a block or blowing a whistle. The need for speed, for sheer brute speed, and for the mind to utterly conquer the body is an addiction. It's an addiction. It's essentially a positive addiction, but it's still an addiction. It can be transposed, though, onto many endeavors other than the violent, all-out, brutishly physical act of sprinting. I always felt that that same necessarily egotistical certainty that I felt as an athlete, that force was also with me, that power was with me as well in my coaching career. Some of my athletes here will attest to the fact that we had some pretty successful teams. Also my teaching career, I felt that the force was with me. And until very recently, I felt that that force was with me in my administrative career as well. When you test the elusive reality of world-class talent in any endeavor, and when you test it over the years, it can be a cumulative experience that gives you ample cause to honor the presence of some marvelous magic in your being and in your body, until at some certain point you open your eyes to discover that the magic, which had always unmistakably signaled its presence, has begun to wane. Almost imperceptibly, but it has begun to wane. Perhaps you're just a tenth of a second slower at the 2:20 mark of a 440-yard dash. You're just a little less willing, maybe, to go and do battle at a board meeting that's going to last until midnight. It's going to be brutal. You've got an 8 o'clock meeting the next morning and 3 more night meetings and a weekend meeting. You guys all know what I'm talking about, who have been through it. Whatever our level of ability, whatever our level of competition, there is inevitably a point in every kind of career where we confront the incarnate reality. Incarnate, where's Dave Brewery? Incarnate reality, you know, right in the flesh. That for some reason or combination of reasons, it's time for some kind of change, perhaps a complete change. As most of you know, my reason for retiring earlier than I had planned to retire was to protect the livelihoods of some of my administrative staff who sooner or later were going to have their jobs endangered by the horrendous cuts that were rendered necessary by our treacherous legislators in Lansing, our callous legislators in Lansing. And I have no excuses for them, even though I got an award from one of them tonight. But before I could even consider stepping down, I had to be sure that my directors and principals were reassured that the good people of the Rochester area, and it's been demonstrated, I think, to us more than once now, that there are more of them than there are the other variety, that the good people of Rochester had provided me with a veritable army of support, which would have enabled me to stay in the assistant superintendency till the millennium if I wanted to. But it was really crucial that my directors and principals clearly see and understand this before I made any move to leave, because some of my staff were getting extremely nervous about supporting my initiatives at one point for fear they themselves would become the next targets, and that was understandable. It was particularly true at the building level, and I understood it. It's rather ironic that after I weathered the storm of that reactionary, what was the word, tempest? Reactionary onslaught. It was the state government, not the opposition out there, that finally got me. In the present economic climate, we simply can't afford to have 3 executive positions in my division, the Division of Instruction. So now, with me gone, we're only going to have 2, at a considerable long-term cost savings. I was the only one of us who was old enough to do it at that level, and so I had to retire to safeguard the careers of my staff. I really saw no other acceptable solution. It wasn't something that I did easily, I can tell you. But perhaps intangibly, this wasn't my only reason. I'm getting back to that alchemy idea again. It wasn't my only reason, because perhaps it truly is time for a total change. In recent administrative meetings in Rochester, since I announced I was retiring, I felt kind of like the proverbial ghost at the party. You know how that is, or maybe some of you don't. Those of you who have been through retirement, Sam Flam's here, former superintendent in Berkeley, Lou Schulman's here, former superintendent in Farmington. There are others here whom I would have liked to introduce their presence, so I just sneaked it in, you know. But they know what retirement is like because they've been through it. Pete Petros, a lot of the guys out here know it. And since I announced I was retiring, I really have felt that way. And for those of you who haven't gone through that bittersweet experience of retirement, let me offer you an analogy. Retirement is probably very much like divorce. In other words, it's major surgery. Amputative surgery in a certain sense, whether or not you want to admit it. And I really am not quite ready to admit it yet. You know, it has an aura of unreality about it, because I'm surrounded tonight with so many of my colleagues who will no longer really be my colleagues. And that hurts. When my old friend Wayne Dyer heard that I was retiring, he called and assured me that I wouldn't regret my decision. Wayne always had that wonderful sky's the limit, pulling your old strings, what were his other books, type of attitude. He had that attitude. Which is consistent with the titles of those books that he wrote. And he was very helpful in getting me thinking in the right mode again. In any case, I can finally say unequivocally, almost unequivocally, that now I'm at peace with my decision. A couple of months ago, Steve Barnaby. Is Steve Barnaby here tonight? He said that he might be able to make it. He's not. Okay, I can talk about him a little bit. I won't say anything bad. I'm impressed with Steve Barnaby. He's a very good writer. The trouble is, you know, he thinks too much like me. I'm surprised that observer-eccentric newspaper chain lets him write some of the things he writes, and now they're going to let me write some of the things that I want to write. Wow. Anyway, he's a managing editor of the observer-eccentric chain, and as was mentioned earlier, he retired and called me and asked me to write a weekly column, and I accepted his offer. And tonight I had intended to preview my first column that is scheduled to run tomorrow, but I'm not sure exactly what I did with that column because I can't find the speech with my notes on it. So you can be happy, you know, I'm not going to read it. Anyway, it was long. I think I'll just let you buy the paper. You know, it's coming out tomorrow. It features my speculation regarding what I might seek to do in my retirement years. And it also invites the readers to stay tuned for a future column in which I plan to spell out ways that can help fight the war against intolerance, which is going to be America's most vital contest of the coming century, as I think we in this room all know, but there are some folks out there, you know, that haven't quite grasped that yet. I know that most of you already have helped and will continue to help in that war against racism, that war against ethnocentrism, which I'll be discussing in part of this inaugural column that you'll be seeing tomorrow. If you want to put down the whatever it is, a quarter, I don't know. 50 cents, okay, 50 cents. Going. But, you know, seriously, all of the marvelous people assembled in this hall tonight represent, I mean, just look around us, a living, breathing example of the diverse talents and backgrounds that can unite into a beautiful symphony to make America even greater than it is, and to truly bring our democratic ideal and our American dream into full fruition. Thanks for the clapping. It helped me swallow a couple times. My mouth is getting real dry. Your talents in such an endeavor are needed now, though. They're needed now more than ever, because America is drowning in fiscal and educational and sociological and demographic and other kinds of problems. While disgracefully, our present state government and our present national leadership is evasive. Thanks, Deborah. They're evasive and they're devious. You can throw in the adjectives. I'm not going to curse tonight, I promise that too. But they're self-serving. That's not a curse word, but to me it is. They're irresponsible. They're remote. They're opportunistic. And that's a word I hate more than any of the others. I've known some folks who are opportunistic in powerful positions who didn't belong there. They can do a lot of damage. Why does George Bush let Sununu torpedo the civil rights negotiations? Also, how can he talk about being the education president? This is water, by the way. You know, how can he talk like that when he doesn't even seem to understand that the real challenge in the cities is getting the kids off drugs, you know, and to save them from functional illiteracy? Education president. In the environment I'm right now, I see hundreds of leaders sitting out in front of me tonight, and you are all leaders, every one of you. No matter what your capacity is, you are leaders or potential leaders. If every one of you were to get together with me and Dick Lobenthal, who I think is still sitting over there, and use the acronym MOSAIC that was mentioned earlier, a multicultural organization for social advocacy and interfaith cooperation, MOSAIC. It's an acronym. If you would all get together with me and with him and with some of the others of us, Manifa Jumani, your dedication and your exceptional and diverse skills could become an overwhelming force within this state and ultimately within this nation, because it has to start somewhere, to ensure that that American dream is indeed fulfilled. I can remember on the historic night, it was a solemn night for many of us, that the great Wayne State University track coach David L. Holmes retired. He said something that transfixed the hearts of a cross-generational assemblage of his athletes and ex-athletes who had come to commemorate the end of an era. And what that man said was something I never forgot, because I worshiped that man. The gathering that evening included judges, social workers, medical doctors, dentists. We got Ron Turner sitting out here. Nobody mentioned him. He was a conference champion in the half mile. I haven't seen him for over 30 years. Looks like he'd still run it. Policemen, business executives, school administrators, lawyers, coaches, other top professionals. We got Jim Plath, he's a lawyer, good half miler. Just like this gathering here tonight, it's the same kind of a composition of people. In fact, a few of those athletes who were there then are also here tonight, miraculously, because that was a long time ago. At that assemblage there that night in 1958, Coach Holmes said to us, this company will never again assemble in its entirety. Never again. He was right, of course. And sadly, the same is undoubtedly true of the assemblage that I'm addressing here on this night, 33 years later. But I know that we will continue to meet together individually and in smaller groups for the remaining duration of my life. And many of you will continue to do this beyond the duration of my life and beyond the duration of the lives of the more elder ones among us. And I also know that I, with you, and you with me, and ultimately without me, will go forth again, just as you already have, some of you, and continue to do all the things on behalf of the future of our children and our region and our state and our country that you have done and will continue to do so well. Making this world a better, safer, and more peaceful place, a more humane place for our fellow man and woman, and for other earthly creatures to live in, and for those youngsters who will follow us, is really our only true purpose, our only worthy purpose in life. It's what gives life its meaning. Rochester Board of Education Vice President Keith Wittenstrom said in a commencement address last week, and it made an incredible impression on me, that we are all angels with only one wing, and we need to embrace each other in order to be able to fly. How beautifully true that is. Keith was quoting someone else. I forget who he was quoting. I'm quoting him. But that's what education is about. You will quote me, and someone else will quote you, quoting me. I hope. Maybe not. It's okay. It's safe again now. The board election's over. If I have any deep regrets about leaving formal, official, professional K through 12 education, other than only getting to serve half of my term as president of, what do we call it? Where's the assistant superintendent in Berkeley? I think she's an officer now. What are we? What's our organization? I'm president of it. Marion, where are you? What are we? Anyway, we're the Assistant Superintendent Association of the County of Oakland. Sounds pretty good. I regret just serving half of the term on that, but I'll tell you my greatest regret regarding leaving, I think you already know, because I'm leaving a knowledgeable staff and a capable staff, tremendous leadership staff in the Rochester schools and in my huge division of instruction, which I led for 7 highly productive years. In fact, why don't all the directors and principals and assistant principals in Rochester stand up right now? Because everybody should give them a round of applause. Come on, you guys. There they are. There's a department head out there too, John Houghton. Where's John Houghton? There's a supervisor, Carol Wright. Where's Carol? You know, it's not just the high-ranking ones. Everybody makes the machine function. It's a well-oiled machine. It's a documented fact. I think we all know that. It's an irrefutable fact that my incredibly innovative and productive division successfully completed over 10 times more divisional operations. I know I get kidded for that a lot, but you know, it's true. Every year. I don't know how they do it. I mean, a lot of volunteer time. It's probably going to increase a little bit. You know, our budget isn't what it ought to be in the near future, but I think they do more of that than any other instructional division, certainly in the entire county and probably in the entire state as well. And my splendid successor, Beverly Stone, who came to us last year from Bloomfield Hills to become one of my 2 top assistants, and she filled the great big shoes of the great Bill Wan. She's going to need all the help she can get in and out of Rochester to carry forth our initiatives on behalf of our 11,400 children, which is why all of us are here. And so is the talented Merle Bartley, going to need that help in his new and expanded role, very important role of General Director. What are you, Merle? All K-12 programs? What do we finally call it? It's the whole Megillah. And so also is their boss sitting over there, leaning on his hand. Superintendent John Schultz. There's been a lot of talk about my style being so different from Dr. Schultz's. And no 2 people have totally identical styles. But most of you know that John Schultz and I have both shared the same general philosophy And we both have shared the same long-range vision for the school district's future. Also, we're both very casual and laid back in our approach to our jobs. Right, John? And if any of you who know both of us believe that, I got a bridge somewhere in Brooklyn that sell real cheap to you. You know, some people accuse me of being such a nonconformist. But Dr. Schultz is the one who wears white shoes with his black cap and gown. The graduation ceremonies, not me. You know, I was wearing black shoes. Seriously. Dr. Schultz and Mrs. Stone and Mr. Bartley, who are taking over the reins, at least the latter two. John's already got the reins. They're really going to need a lot of support because even though, as I said, there are many people of goodwill in Rochester, let us not, any of us, ever forget for a single minute that there is also an organized and growing group out there that has sinister national affiliations. And it's been on attacking everything we've accomplished in this district during the past 7 years in the areas of globalist, humanist, multicultural, affective education. However, despite this, and despite the sneak attacks our remarkable state legislature has launched against us financially, I leave the office of the Rochester Schools Assistant Superintendency with the expectation that the initiatives I began will be carried forth by all of the superb leadership staff whom I had the main hand, as someone mentioned tonight, in hiring or promoting. Of my 18 principals, only one was here when I got here. There's been a nearly total turnover at the supervisor level, the coordinator level, the department head level, the assistant principal level, every level in that period of time. And only 2 of my 9 directors were here at the directorial level. Deborah was, but she wasn't a director. And one of them is retiring. And the other one, old Dick Turco. Where's Dick? Dick here today? Anyway, he's, okay, I can talk about him too. He's getting pretty long in the tooth, you know, let's face it. So with my departure, that turnover of leadership is essentially complete. And I pass the baton into Mrs. Stone's very capable hands with absolute confidence. In finishing this speech, that's the cue that is coming to an end. In my 3-decade career in K-12 education, which seems like it began yesterday, I am obligated to honor and thank those who have passed on into the hereafter, whose courage and counsel and spirit helped to inspire me to aspire to greatness. I tried. My late, great college coach, David L. Holmes, my late high school coaches, Ralph Green and Jack Rice, my father, who was the toughest welterweight in Detroit back around 1920. My first principal, Marjorie Rehead, God, she made us work, didn't she, George? He was a student and I was a teacher, and she'd have the girls in there and have them kneel, and boy, if those skirts didn't touch the ground, they went home, man. Yeah, into the great beyond now. She was a fantastic lady. And Detroit Butzel Junior High Principal Martha Sanders, and Principal Bill Lutz of Smith Elementary in Rochester. No, not in Rochester, he was in Plymouth, excuse me. I went to several conferences with that man. He's a great man. You know, a lot of times great men don't get as much publicity as they ought to, and perhaps some who aren't so great get too much, present company included. Principal Fred Hugger of University Hills Elementary in Rochester, whom I had the privilege to know for only a short time before he passed away. My athletic business manager in Berkeley, the rare and wonderful humanist Bill Richer, whose wife is here tonight. My old coaching colleagues and friends, Lorenzo Wright and Leroy Dews and Fred Pieper and Carl Holmes and Mike Haddad. The student manager of my fine Finney team, Henry Gerstheimer, who was killed in the Tet Offensive. We've got Ron Schultz here tonight, who was wounded in the Tet Offensive. Henry Gerstheimer didn't come back from the Tet Offensive. Dennis Turner, who many of my athletes who are here tonight remember as a city champion runner at Pershing High, who was murdered in Detroit. Cliff Cushman, And I'm sure Hayes Jones remembers, my teammate on the United States national team who was shot down over Cambodia. He was a fighter pilot. And my invincible Wayne State and Detroit Track Club teammate, Bullet Billy Smith, the great world record-setting low hurdler. Took Hayes Jones to break his record, as a matter of fact. All of them have vanished now into timeless eternity, but none of them will ever be forgotten. In his great narrative poem, The Death of the Hired Man. Where's Berube? Who wrote that, Dave? Who wrote The Death of the Hired Man? Anybody remember who wrote The Death of the Hired Man? Was it? You bet. Poet laureate of our country. Described the hired man as having nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope. Unlike Robert Frost's hired man, I have much to look backward to with pride. I am tremendously proud of the support and friendship and love which you have given me. And I look forward with hope to continue and to escalate a beautiful interaction with every single one of you. I saw Sandy Whitting here for the first time. Where's Sandy Whittington? Yep, there he is. By God. You know, he's in front of me again, too. That's the only guy that ever beat me in the quarter mile in high school. Stand up, Sandy. I'm not supposed to introduce any more athletes, but, you know, that guy's a hell of an athlete. It was the early 20th century English essayist G.K. Chesterton who wrote, "There is a so-called great man who makes every man feel small. But the truly great man is a man who makes everyone feel great." All of the great men and women who are with me in this hall tonight have made me feel overwhelmingly humble and overwhelmingly great at the same time. I would like to thank you, unparalleled people, one last time for your support, and for your sublimely wonderful presence here. The Rochettes, I named them, but I'll tell you, they could go on Broadway right now. And so could all of you. And I will close with a prayer that whichever God you pray to may bless and keep and guide you all. Thank you.